What we are watching is federal judges all the way up to the United States Supreme Court straining to restrain a lawless presidency. There's no other way to put it. At every level, from the trial court level to the District Court of Appeal level, all the way to the United States Supreme Court. And it's all coming to a head off of a 1 a.m. ruling of the Supreme Court. Let me just stop and tell you, that is highly unusual. This is a tortoise-like deliberative body. They don't like to be roused in the middle of the night. They're all in their 60s and 70s. And they issued the 1 a.m. order because they don't trust the Trump administration, because they are deeply skeptical of the Trump administration. And we talk about how we got here with new rulings coming out of Texas from the Fifth Circuit, from the trial judge to the United States Supreme Court, and why it's more than just the lives of 50 undocumented that hangs in the balance. It's our rule of law that hangs in the balance. Strip off the names of the lawsuits. They don't matter. What matters is the protection and putting around a safety net around our constitutional protections of due process and notice. That's all that matters. That's all that should keep people up at night. That particular issue. We cover it on Legal AF. That's the podcast we do every Wednesday and Saturday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on the Midas Touch Network. And here is an After Dark clip. Judges should be humble and have humility. That's the guy that just wrote the passage. And there's some others in there that we'll touch on when we get to that segment. So that was the fourth, saying we respect what Judge Zinnes is doing. She's doing everything right off the Supreme Court decision in her favor about Armando Abrego Garcia. You go, Judge. You do you. But while we're here, let's use soaring rhetoric to completely tear down Donald Trump and appeal to his inner angels, his higher angels. He has no higher angels. It's all devils replacing other devils. That's the fourth. Then the D.C. Court of Appeals, a day later, in a 3-judge panel that you and I worried about because we saw 2 Trumpers in Rayo and Katsas, they came out and said, well, we hear you, Judge Boasberg, about your probable cause on criminal contempt against the Trump administration and possible referral for prosecution. But why don't we put a pin in that for a day or two while we get our arms around the process? So forget your next Wednesday deadline, stay. And then we have a dissent from Pillard, the Obama appointee, who said, why are we staying anything? This isn't even right for an appeal. And then 1 a.m. or 10 p.m., whatever it was, Eastern Time, Pacific Time, bing, 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 you're my phone. Everybody's phone starts blowing up. I'm walking a dog. My dog didn't feel well late last night. And I get, holy cow, look what just got issued. And we had been following and tracking this cases, what the ACLU had been doing off of 3 weeks ago's ruling by the Supreme Court, which told Judge Boasberg, you're right and you're wrong. You're right on the Alien Enemies Act about there needs to be due process and notice, but you're wrong about the procedure. It needs to be habeas corpus petitions in individual places where these people are being processed before they leave the United States. We'll just completely ignore the 250 that already went, and we'll never get that due process. That's now the law of the land. So go do it by individual petitions. All right, ACLU said, we'll see you judges, and we'll match you. They filed individual petitions and class action petitions on habeas corpus in various jurisdictions and started getting rulings in their favor. The one in Texas, Northern District, that one in particular, they couldn't get anybody to give them the stay, and they had notice from a number of immigration lawyers that their clients were given imminent, their removal was imminent, off on a plane under the Alien Enemies Act over to El Salvador, like any moment. So they ran to the judge. The judge says no. They ran to the Fifth Circuit. The Fifth Circuit, of course, said, well, we don't see what the harm is going to be, putting them on a plane without due process. And so they had to file this fast application last night to the Supreme Court. And in a 7-2 decision, we have an administrative stay. You and I are going to talk more about what administrative stays, where they were very pointed and said, nobody in the Northern District of Texas, including Blue Bonnet, wherever that is, that is a part of this putative class, is going anywhere until we figure out with briefing what's going on here. So everybody sit down. Now, let's see what the Trump administration does next. They're very good at taunting, and they're very good at funny memes and getting Bukele, who's their puppet, to do funny things to their MAGA base. But this is the United States Supreme Court and their commands. And we've got 2 judges the Supreme Court and Judge Zinnes in the Fourth Circuit, Maryland trial court, who are maneuvering this administration into possible second level contempt.
All right. There's a lot of moving parts here, and a lot of people are saying, okay, Abrego, Supreme Court, Texas, Blue Bonnet detention, Boasberg, Judge Zinnes. You guys are saying a lot of things. Can you break it down for me what's happening? So let's just talk about states, districts, right? There's DC proceedings, District of Columbia, federal court there. That's Judge Boasberg. Judge Boasberg was the judge who ordered that whatever Trump was doing with the first group of Venezuelans who were sent to the El Salvador concentration camps be returned. The Trump regime violated that order, sent that first group that's currently right now in CCOT, the El Salvador concentration camp. And so Boasberg, DC, federal judge, he was the one who's found probable cause for the Trump regime in contempt, criminal contempt, for violating his order. Separately, the Supreme Court reversed Judge Boasberg's order, essentially ordering the return of those prisoners and ordering or being involved and enjoining what the Trump regime did, because the Supreme Court ruled, as Popok said, that because he's a DC judge, he doesn't have jurisdiction, say, for people who live in Maryland or people who are being held in Texas, that he could only deal with the things before him in Washington, D.C. So therefore, there has to be cases filed in different districts. Okay, so Boasberg, federal judge, D.C. The D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals is like the boss of Boasberg. They're the appeals court that sits above the trial court. Above it all is the United States Supreme Court. So we understand that part. Separately, Abrego Garcia. Abrego Garcia, he's referred to as a Maryland man, right? So why is the case filed in Maryland? He's from Maryland. That's where he lives. He's married to an American woman. His kids are citizens. His wife's a citizen. An immigration judge in 2019 when Trump was in office, issued a withholding order saying you can deport Abrego to other countries, just not to El Salvador. Also, they gave him a work permit in 2019. He has to check in with ICE, but he was able to work in Maryland. He had no criminal history, never criminal history. That's on the paperwork itself. But because there was a double hearsay accusation by a crooked cop who then pled guilty to other misconduct involving prostitutes and paying prostitutes and all this weird stuff and criminal stuff, the immigration judge in 2019 did say you can deport if you want to at your election, just not to El Salvador, but he can work in the United States. We don't think that he's that big of a danger, so we're going to give him a work permit, which requires background checks. In Maryland, there's a federal court there. Judge Boasberg's a DC judge, so he's not going to be the Maryland judge. Maryland's going to be a Maryland judge. So a district judge in Maryland, federal court judge, the way Boasberg's a federal judge, there are federal judges in Maryland. The federal judge in Maryland is federal Judge Zinnes. That's her name. It's Judge Zinnes. And so Judge Zinnes is the one who has been following the Supreme Court's 9-0 ruling, which is return Abrego, facilitate the return. Zinnes was the first to say return Abrego Garcia. Then the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals is the boss. They sit above. They're the appeals court for the Maryland District Court. Remember in D.C., I said the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals sits above the D.C. District Court. In Maryland, it is the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. In New York, it would be the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. In Florida or Georgia, it would be the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. There's different circuit
11th.
Sorry, 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. Colorado would be the 10th.
Right.
Sorry, 11th Circuit Court of Appeals.
I just want to show you I was listening.
That's good. Thank you. In different districts, they have different circuit courts that sit above the circuit courts of appeals. So Maryland, it's Fourth Circuit. So when we're talking about the Fourth Circuit, they are hearing Trump's appeal over federal Judge Zinnes requiring that there be a process for facilitating the return of Abrego Garcia. Now, separately, there's Texas federal court. Why is Texas involved? Because the second batch of Venezuelan migrants, remember the first batch, and it's horrific that I'm referring to them as batches, groups of people, but that's how the Trump regime is treating them as. The first group's already in CICOT, the concentration camp in El Salvador. A second group was moved to a detention center in Texas in the Northern District called the Blue Bonnet Detention Center. That's its name, Blue Bonnet Detention Center. It's an ICE facility where they're being held. So the jurisdiction there, and the Trump regime wants the jurisdiction to be in Texas, more Republican judges, right-wing judges, Trump-appointed judges in Texas. So the Northern District of Texas has jurisdiction there. And there, the judge is a judge named Wes Hendricks, who Trump appointed. So we all have the story straight. D.C., Boasberg. Maryland, Zinnes, Fourth Circuit, Maryland, D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, D.C. In Texas, it's the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals that oversees Texas. The federal judge who has this case is named Judge Hendricks. Judge Wes Hendricks. So those are all the judges who are involved. And the Supreme Court is above it all. So I just want everybody to have their story straight. Now, with this second batch of migrants, the Trump regime, this guy Ensign, who's the Trump DOJ lawyer, made the representation both in DC and in Texas, where the ACLU brought two separate cases. Because of these lawsuits, Ensign said, we are not going to, we promise you, we won't send this second group of migrants to the concentration camp in El Salvador without a court order. Just trust us. Trust me, bro. Why was it in the two different cases? Why was it in DC? And why was it in Texas? Because the ACLU, who represented these migrants, didn't really know. They wanted Judge Boasberg to issue a class-wide injunction. Boasberg says, I don't have the power to do that because the Supreme Court said they have to be filed in individual states. So the ACLU went to Texas before Judge Hendricks, and the Trump regime said, we're not going to do anything. Don't worry, Hendricks. We're not going to send him. So Hendricks, Popok, was basically like, it's a moot issue. The government's representing they're not going to send it. So what can I do? So then it was appealed to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, and the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals basically sat on it. Then there was new evidence that the Trump regime, even though they made the representation, said they were going to send these people to El Salvador, to which the ACLU went back in front of the Texas District Court Judge Hendricks. And then Hendricks, because he's a Trumpy guy who tried to be like, oh, I don't know what to do, said, sorry, I don't have jurisdiction. The Fifth Circuit now has jurisdiction because you've already appealed my other order. Nothing I can do. The Fifth Circuit didn't do anything. So the ACLU with the second group had to go to the United States Supreme Court and say, Supreme Court, we need you to do something, to which the Trump regime said to the Supreme Court, hey, Supreme Court, don't worry. We've told the district court in DC. We've told the district court in Texas. We're not going to send these migrants to the concentration camps until they get a habeas proceeding. So that's the framework. And then when the Supreme Court still said, Popok, we don't trust you, that's a big deal. I'm sorry, Popok, I described that so long, but there's so much moving parts with this district, that district. I want you to talk about the specific cases, but I wanted to do a little professor lesson of where these districts are. That's all.
Yeah. And look, let me take it from another angle. A masterful, and this should give our audience a lot of confidence, a masterful display of litigation skill and strategy and tactics by the American Civil Liberties Union in this, everything that you just described, most of what you just described as it relates to those that haven't yet been removed, that are being threatened with imminent removal. The lack of due process is the problem here. literally after dark. I mean, we got that order at 1 a.m. on Saturday morning. If you like that kind of law and politics analysis, I got some great news for you. We got a Legal AF YouTube channel that we formed right before the election for this critical moment of resistance. Come on over, hit Legal AF MTN for the Midas Touch Network. I curate the channel. I'm Michael Popok. I got a dozen other collaborators and contributors over there with me. Shan Wu, Dina Dahl, Court Accountability Action, and all of their great personnel. Melba Pearson, Dave Arenberg, you name it. We're over there. We're doing 10, 11, 12 videos a day. And when you subscribe, you're going to get a reminder every time a video is posted. So that's one. Second way to support Legal AF is the podcast. You know, with much adulation and understandable fanfare, the Midas Touch Brothers podcast, #1 in the world. Crazy. We're number 10 on that same chart. And I want to be at least the silver medalist behind the brothers. I can only do it with your help. And we'll be able to leapfrog over these bro podcasters, MAGA podcasters, get us up on the podium with the brothers. And we can only do that by subscribing, watching the YouTube versions on Wednesday and Saturday at 8 p.m. Eastern time, and then at the same time picking us up on audio wherever you get your podcast from. Just plug in Legal AF. So until my next opportunity to talk to you, I'm Michael Popok. In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories, the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.